Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
It is a star-studded DMZ.
We have special guests that I'm not aware of.
No special guests, except I feel like I've had a good few days here. Yesterday, I was my Daily Beast piece was tweeted by Martina Navratilova.
Wow,
which is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I had that to the list up there with Judd Apatow and Roseanne Barr.
Very nice.
Others who tweeted my stuff. But more importantly, I think it's fair to say we are both now followed by Tyler Mahan Co, who hosts the amazing podcast Cocaine and Rhinestones.
But we have to acknowledge, who did he follow first? Follow Bill Scher first.
You get all the credit for this. Now, he was perusing apparently the comment sections of Blogging Head. Someone sent him. Somehow he saw that we had talked about him on this show last week. And he just noted that the comment section here was interesting. So I'm not sure what to read into that.
We love the fans.
But if you're not listening,
your comments are legendary. Your comments are worthy of observation by podcast luminaries.
So if you're not listening to that podcast, Bill and I both highly recommend it.
I'm almost done with season 1.
Yeah,
been binging all week. We gushed too much last week. We should get to Nebraska.
All right, I want to gush about my podcast. I had David Axelrod on yesterday.
Oh wow,
it was great.
Did you give a lot of old war stories?
Well, I asked him about new stuff. Like I asked him about the Philadelphia Eagles versus Donald Trump. I asked him about Bill Clinton's mishandling of the MeToo moment, which he called shocking, his answer. But then we did get into some of the old times, and it was cool. David has this theory, which I aspire to, which is you should construct a career where you can always storm out of your job and tell your boss to go F themselves. And he talked about how difficult it was to do that when your boss is the president. So, funny little story, but you have to listen to the podcast to get it.
Awesome. Well, about the Eagles thing.
Yeah.
I heard Maggie Haberman on CNN suggesting this wasn't a good idea for Trump. They may think this is sort of the same old kind of culture war games that are good for them, but in this case, they probably, people in Pennsylvania who are Eagles fans, a swing state that Trump is needs to keep in his pocket. May not be thrilled with the idea of snubbing the home team, for example. Do you have a sense that there's anything about this which seems pettier than usual for Trump, or do you think this is just what works for Trump? It's churning that culture war always in his interest.
I mean, I'm sort of torn over this on so many levels. On one hand, there's a story that the Eagles had told the White House that they were going to have like 30 people, and then at the last minute said, well, there's only going to be 10 showing up. And so maybe there was an attempt to embarrass Trump by some of the players. On the other hand, it is true that the Eagles won the Super Bowl and are wildly popular in a very important state. And the loyalty and allegiance that the fans have to that team. This is a team that despite some of the early reporting by Fox News, the picture of them, taking a knee, did not take a knee. And they, in fact, are several, devout Christians on that team. And Fox later apologized for using pictures of the players kneeling in prayer, where they were suggesting that they were actually kneeling during the national anthem. So there's a bunch of different, theories or arguments here. But, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think Trump's instinct is to stoke the culture wars, and that's what he certainly did. I
mean, you're closer to Red America. You're closer to Football Nation than I am. I'm still strictly Aussie rules, and my North Melbourne Kangaroos are having a surprisingly good year so far. But so in my deep blue dot of the world, I have one friend who does a Super Bowl party every year, and a lot of people come just because it's a chance to eat snacks, watch commercials, see the halftime show. Whether or not some people care about football, but a lot of people don't. We just do it, and he's still gonna. He hasn't stopped doing it yet, but he has said like this is getting harder and harder to do for a multitude of reasons. And he's mostly focused on. He was focused on the concussion issue before,
right?
And now it's the NFL owners capitulating to Trump about the right to protest during games, and he's like, I'm still going to do it, but it's less and less about the game at this point.
Yeah,
I know it's filtering down to that level here.
Yeah,
but I don't know how it's playing out in the rest of the country.
No, I think that this is a real problem for the NFL, and they've found a way to piss off everybody, right? So people like me, I tuned out because of the protests. Your friend is tuning out because the NFL capitulated. So, they ended up, they ended up basically, when you try to be all things to all people, sometimes you're nothing to to everybody. And so they found a way to anger people on the left and on the right. I can just tell you, I quit watching football, but I'm not like a fanatic about it. I watched a couple minutes of the end of one of the playoff games last year, and then I watched the Super Bowl, and that's it. But I didn't watch any regular season games. I actually found myself happier. I think a lot of it, frankly, is just that the being a Redskins fan was really depressing. So it has maybe has more to do with the Redskins than the NFL.
Are you going into the Capitals now?
I'm rooting. I'm not paying much attention.
Have you watched the game? Have you watched a hockey game?
No.
Have you sunk that low that you'll watch a hockey game?
I mean, I'm rooting, rock the red and all that, all Caps. I hope they win. For those who aren't following, the Caps are in the Stanley Cup Finals. They're up 3-1 as we tape this. If they choke and lose the next 3 games, it's going to be very depressing here in DC. But they look great, and as we tape this, they're playing in Vegas tonight. So. Go Caps. So
the other controversial thing Trump did, if I can, maybe there's 5 other things I can't remember, but the pardon train continues. So not only did he pardon Dinesh D'Souza, which was last week. All time is a blur now. He's teasing pardons of Rod Blagojevich, which you wrote about. You had a great piece where you're like, if conservatives are rallying around a corrupt Chicago Democrat, something is wrong with the force.
Especially when Trey Gowdy and Jeff Sessions are enemies of the people on the right, and Rod Blagojevich is a cause célèbre, that is a problem.
But his wife goes on Gene Piro's show, The Shame of Westchester County, my hometown.
That's a truly angry woman.
So she goes. So his wife was on the show and basically plea for a pardon or a commutation. I think then someone else went on recently. It's the pardon process is not a plot. Sorry,
Papadopoulos' wife went on Tucker's show.
So you don't apply to the Justice Department to have your application be re-vetted. You find a Fox News host who will book you, and that's how you get your pardon now.
Al Pundit joked that this should be a TV show. There should be a weekly show where you go on Fox and beg for your husband to be pardoned, and then at the end of the week, Trump gets to decide whether or not to pardon them. So we joke, but it's actually we joke, but this is the signal. The signal is, if you want to be pardoned, you go on Fox News and beg the president, and you have to attack his enemies, and you have to praise him and talk about how great he is. It's really disturbing.
And so, Blagojevich is in prison because he treated the Senate seat like a prize. He famously said, I got this effing thing, and it's effing golden, and I'm not giving it away for nothing. I'm not sure that's not quite verbatim quote, but that's the gist of it. Trump is treating the pardon the exact same way. This is a prize that I have, and I'm going to dole it out to ways that benefit me. And this you couldn't describe more swampy behavior, in a novel or a movie like that. To what extent, we always keep talking about this, is there a line Trump can cross where even his base says, okay, that's too much for me?
Well, this just goes to show you how there is no objective reality, and how reality is defined by Trump, and loyalty to Trump is what defines whether or not you're a conservative, right? And what Trump decides. So again, you have Trey Gowdy and Jeff Sessions who are being airbrushed out of the movement. And then you have people like Rod Blagojevich, a Democrat who's utterly corrupt from a big city machine, who was, convicted by a jury. I mean, but because he is a celebrity in a sense, and because
he was on The Apprentice.
He was on The Apprentice. So was Martha Stewart, apparently, right?
Right. Well, she had her Apprentice spinoff.
And it fits into the narrative of like overzealous prosecution.
That seems to be the biggest driver.
The deep state, overzealous, going after people for just practicing, as Jean Pirro was saying, like they're just practicing politics, as if selling a Senate seat is like just normal horse trading that goes on.
It's direct the whole point of the campaign was they're practicing politics in the swamp, and I'm going to be different and not play politics.
But it's the difference is like if we do it, we are the people. The swamp are the people who are going after us. The prosecutors, they're the corrupt deep state swamp who are trying to, as Jean Pirro, or maybe it was Blagojevich's wife. It was Blagojevich's wife saying in that interview to Jean Pirro that these people are trying to overturn elections. Does that sound familiar, Bill? Sound like something that Donald Trump might talk about?
Sure, and I get, but it would seem to me like I get the political tribal element of all this, so I can see pardoning D'Souza and having D'Souza fans of their conservatives say, "Yeah, he saved one of our own. That's great." But when it's a Democratic politician who Republicans have mocked for years, when it's Martha Stewart, wasn't a Democratic donor, New York City millionaire, there's nothing conservative about her whole persona. When it goes that far, does that make anyone in the Trump base saying, "Wait a second, this narrative doesn't add up for me"?
Well, but in a way, Trump has always been about realigning and redefining things, and in a sense, he is changing the left-right paradigm. And there could be some good things that come out of this. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I don't know what you're saying.
You don't? Okay, well...
I can't see what good comes out of this.
Well, I'm not saying it's... Okay, there's a lot of bad and problematic things with this, as I've written about, ad nauseum. But Donald Trump has taken people... I mean, Roseanne Barr is a prime example, okay? Roseanne Barr is not the kind of person I want to be in the conservative movement. She is not a good person. She is a bad actor. All true. But it's also true that she's now like a Trump supporter, and she didn't used to be. It used to be that if you were sort of like a Christian conservative, like Boy Scout, you were a conservative Republican. And if you were like a Hollywood person, you were a liberal. And Trump is redefining what it, there are people, and a lot of them are very pernicious, but there are people who have joined the Trump Republican Party who would never have been a Mitt Romney supporter.
Sure.
Let's say.
And I think it's perfectly fine to have, who were left-wing cranks, get out of the Democratic Party, go side with Republicans. I'm totally cool with that. But and it's interesting that there are these sort of political tectonic plates that are shifting.
Right.
But
I mean, like Kanye. Kanye is another example.
Sure.
Like, is Kanye just a one-off crazy guy, or is it possible that he creates a permission structure for other African Americans to basically say, I'm going to consider, he's destroyed the notion that you can't. There's an idea that you just can't be a Republican, or you can't, is it? I don't know. Like I think most people would say no. Like I had David Swerdlick from the Washington Post on my podcast talking about this, right? And David was like, no, this doesn't mean anything. It's just a one-off. Kanye's just crazy. Like maybe that's true, but I don't know.
But I think in the larger scheme, you're right that there is some sloshing around of the normal left-right spectrum. I don't know if that is an inherent good. Just movement is good. That we're not in the same camps we were before. Therefore, that's a fine thing. Here's a concrete example: Howard Schultz, who just quit Starbucks as founder and CEO of Starbucks. Right. Widely presumed to be pondering a presidential run.
As David Axelrod said, he may not be the dark horse candidate, but he is the dark roast candidate.
Now, we don't know if he would run in the Democratic primary or if he would try to run as a third-party candidate. He has previously sort of dipped his toe in kind of these no-labels waters. Let's find a way to break through our partisan differences and solve problems. And he appeals to, sort of people like Mike Bloomberg, who think wealthy people who are not tied to any kind of special interest, and not hemmed in by political ideology, who just want to solve problems. That kind of guy probably doesn't have a chance in hell of ever being president. So he doesn't have a chance of being the Democratic nominee, but could sure hell screw up the general election if he ran as a third-party candidate. And because we're in this mode where people don't feel tethered to anything, any kind of party institution, you might get this dumpster fire of a general election where Trump gets reelected with like 34% of the vote or something.
Oh, yeah, that's what he kind of needs. I mean, it's how Bill Clinton did it, and that's how he got reelected.
I still maintain Perot drew from both sides evenly in 1992, did not actually tip the election. And I say
but Bill Clinton did manage to win
twice, never had a majority. 50%. Correct.
Okay, so if you're Donald Trump and you say it's impossible for me to get 50%, then ergo, maybe this is good. I do want to make one point I've made before, but I think it bears repeating, which is this makes me wonder, like, what Trump could have done if he didn't say really racist things. Just like I think Obama could have ended the Republican Party if he had played his cards a little differently. I just wonder what, like, if Donald Trump didn't say like overtly racist things and like, could he bring over the Kim Kardashians of the world and make them Republicans? I mean, he doesn't have the baggage of being a Christian conservative, right? I mean, you could imagine a world where Trump could have gotten elected by being this outsider who was a celebrity, who was controversial and, wanted to do tariffs, let's say, but didn't engage in the worst fever swamp stuff and the birtherism. That guy gets elected president and redefines the Republican Party and makes it possible for someone like Kim Kardashian to be a Republican, changes the culture. I mean,
but it's also possible that Trump's racism was integral.
It's possible
to the campaign that proved he wasn't politically correct. He wasn't part of the liberal secular elite. Yeah. He is fighting for my interests. He doesn't care what anybody says about it.
Well, could he have? Well, and then there's also the question is, could he have gotten elected that way and then pivoted and pulled this off?
Well, I think he totally could have pivoted once he won.
Yeah.
He could have had a bipartisan cabinet. He could have done infrastructure first. He could not play culture war games. And he could have, I think, gotten a lot of stuff through Congress. If you were a person who cared about actual implementation of policy, you would have done that. Trump cares about being in the media as much as possible and control as much as possible.
But as a conservative, you have to understand, we have always had this like inferiority complex about the fact that like all the best celebrities, musicians that we listen to, Bruce Springsteen, people that we listen to, we admire, the best Hollywood actors, were universally on the other side. And those are the people who are defining the culture. In many ways, politics is downstream from culture, and in many ways, they were setting what's cool, how do you dress, how should you talk, and they've always been on the other side. And makes me wonder if Trump had this potential opportunity, where he could have created this permission structure where, like, Kim Kardashian is at the Republican convention supporting the Republican candidate, where Kanye is supporting the Republican candidate, where Republicans would have had celebrities, granted by moving away from some of the things that I
Baio.
I know. I know. That's my point, Bill.
Let me shift gears to Let me shift gears to the primaries last night. Super Primary Tuesday. 8 states.
8 crazy states.
Most people were looking at California, and I'm happy to talk about California. But what I wrote about, it's not published yet. Maybe it'll be published by the time this show gets uploaded. I wrote about South Dakota, which is not going to determine who controls the House or the Senate, because I don't think the House, there's a open House race there. Everyone assumes it's going to be Republican held. I don't believe the Senate races are up. But the governor's race was between Kristi Noem, who is the current representative, U.S. representative, and they only have one, so that's a statewide office, and the state attorney general, Marty Jackley. So you had 2 statewide office holders, a heavyweight bout, and a poll taken towards the end of May had a 1-point race with Noem with a slight edge. And after that poll comes out, the Noem campaign runs an ad, and it's a Noem campaign ad. It's not a third-party dark money ad. It's a Noem campaign ad. It features a woman named Laura Kaiser, and Laura Kaiser was a narcotics agent in a division that Jackley as AG oversees. So it's not directly working under him, but he has authority over her. Several years ago, she's being sexually harassed by one of her colleagues. She confides another male agent. That agent simply gossips to the other guys in the office. They all turn on Kaiser. The word gets to her supervisor. The supervisor doesn't believe her. She gets a bad performance review. She's ordered to get a psychological evaluation for postpartum depression. She's demoted. So then she appeals to Jackley as AG, and Jackley dismisses her grievance and suggests in his letter that she should work on her communication and work ethic. So this gets litigated for several years. She basically sues, saying she was illegally retaliated against. She wins. And then after she wins, she negotiates a settlement for $1.5 million. Then she goes public. And she goes public in December of 2017, and she fingers Jackley as dismissing her grievance. So this is sort of a slow burn story over the course of the campaign, but it only breaks really big in May because Kaiser first accuses Jackley of delaying her settlement payment to try to shut her up. And then a week after that, the Noem campaign runs an ad where Kaiser is speaking to the camera. She's identified on screen as a victim of sexual harassment, and she says, "I don't think Marty Jackley should be governor. I don't think he should be the attorney general." And the text in the ad lays out that Jackley dismissed her claims. And then she goes on to say, essentially, that he broke the law and retaliating against her, and nobody should be above the law. So at the same time, Jackley's running a campaign against Noem, which is she didn't back Trump in 2016. And she's been in Washington. She can't balance a budget. So you might think, who's got the upper hand in a South Dakota Republican primary? The guy who's more loyal to Trump or the woman talking about sexual harassment? Well, the woman talking about sexual harassment won by 13 points. And this comes on the heels of Governor Eric Greitens being forced out of office because the Republican-controlled Missouri legislature was on the verge of impeaching him over his alleged sexual misconduct and blackmail for photographing a woman he was having an affair with while she was bound and naked and blindfolded, and saying, if you ever say a word about this, these photos go everywhere. He tried to stave that off by saying, this is the liberals and the fake media, the fake news spreading this. Republicans legislature said, we're probably going to impeach you, and he got out of there. So my point in all this is the whole Me Too phenomena is not just a Democratic phenomena. There are Republicans who are believing women. Now, it doesn't apply to Trump. You don't see people saying, I believe Trump's accusers now, because we were just saying before, that bond is deep. That Trump is fighting my culture war battle, and I don't care what he does. But down ballot, if you're a Republican, you have to recognize that this affects you too.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I think people are basically made a calculation that, like, Trump is our guy. We're sending him into battle for us. We will excuse all of his whatever he has to do to get the job done. But that's enough. That's all the chaos we need. That's all the, like everybody else. And I think it's a good sign that that Republicans are holding their own accountable when appropriate.
So, I mean, obviously this doesn't mean Republicans are feminists. This doesn't mean there's any change when it comes to abortion or, federal subsidies of birth control. But I have to think that if we're reaching a moment where the basic principle that if a woman is accusing someone, I mean, look, Duke Lacrosse case wasn't that long ago. Rolling Stone wasn't that long ago. You obviously can find individual cases where a woman is not telling the truth.
Right.
The MeToo.
But I mean, I think there's not, to me, I don't see this as a left, right, or conservative liberal thing. I mean, if you're a conservative, you should be on the side of what's right or justice.
But it would be
if the person is, if it is a fake allegation, then that you should point that out. But if it's not, then you shouldn't just stick to your tribe. You should be on the side of justice. I don't see that as like a feminist or liberal argument.
But before MeToo, before Harvey Weinstein, before a Democratic donor became the face of sexual misconduct, if there was a case like Duke Lacrosse or Rolling Stone, a lot of the knee-jerk reaction on the right was, wait a second here, what's the real story here? Is this woman credible? Let's see what her backstory is. And you saw Bill Cosby try that legally in court and failing. It doesn't seem like, looking at Greitens, looking at the South Dakota governor's race, Republicans were not doing that.
Right. But I think that, so, I mean, that's a fair point to make. But I think that I just look at it as America has become more aware of this issue and more like sympathetic, to the fact that like these things are much more ubiquitous than we thought before. And you know what I'm saying?
Well, and the fact that America can believe that way, there is something relatively unifying about Me Too in an age where we've been increasingly polarized is a huge development. I mean, and look, incels exist, Jordan Peterson exists. There are still people profiting off of anti-feminist backlash and even to the point of domestic terrorism.
But I think they have a point too. I mean, there's radical feminism. And there's political correctness, but then there's also being like a decent human being. You know what I mean? And so, like, I don't think that those things are necessarily mutually exclusive.
I mean, you can square certain points, but I think the thrust of Peterson talks about enforced monogamy, and they try to clarify. I don't mean government enforced monogamy, but there is a driving force of the Peterson movement and the incel movement, which is this culture is getting too feminized, and men need to assert their dominance.
There's some people who, sure there are some people out there who say that. Yeah.
Right. But and I'm not saying we shouldn't be exploring that. I mean, it's literally causing murders, so you have to take it seriously. But while that is happening, Kristi Noem is winning an election in South Dakota by fighting sexual harassment at the same time. So I think what's happening with the incel movement is more on the fringes than what's happening in the Republican Party generally.
Yeah. Well, and my hope is that the Me Too moment is a positive, bipartisan thing that basically brings people together and makes people better humans, better Americans, treat each other better, work together better. I really hope that it turns out that way. I also have a concern about, overreach, but luckily, it seems like that's settled down a little bit, and that, the truly bad actors like the Weinsteins are going to be, held
accountable.
That's the word I'm looking for. Held accountable, and that other people like Aziz Ansari are not going to get destroyed because of the more gray areas,
So let's another part of the primaries. California, it looks as if the fear on the Democratic side was that Democrats were going to get locked out of various competitive House races because of the top two system. Everyone's on the same ballot, Republican, Democrat, third party. Whoever's in the top two in June moves on to the November ballot regardless of party. So there were fears that...
Is that the jungle primary?
You can call it jungle primary, yes. So there were fears that with so many Democrats running, they would split their own vote and two Republicans would get on the ballot and they'd be totally locked out. I believe there's still votes to count because it's mostly mail balloting in California, and some of them, if it's postmarked on Tuesday, it gets counted later on Friday. So things aren't totally done, but it looks as if there aren't going to be any lockouts there. And in some cases, the DCCC, one of the stories here is that DCCC was getting involved in these races. We want to make sure a Democrat gets through, and so we want to put some money and some of our prestige into saying, pick this person, make sure this one gets in there. In some cases, they got their way. In some cases, they didn't.
So am I right? Devin, what's the guy's name? Not Devin Nunes. I'm sorry, Villaraigosa.
Was the governor's race now?
Lost
badly.
And what's that?
He lost badly to.
And then who won? The former mayor of San Francisco.
Well, that's not quite done yet. But let's talk about those statewide mayor's races for a second. So, Gavin Newsom's lieutenant governor.
That's what I'm thinking of. Gavin Newsom.
Gavin Newsom was always leading in the polls. He's not beloved by everyone on the left. But his main challenger was Antonio Villaraigosa, and Ragosa got huge backing from the charter school movement and people like Mike Bloomberg.
That's interesting.
And they spent a lot of money to try to get into the top two, whereas Newsom was trying to help boost Republican John Cox to box out Villaraigosa, and Trump endorsed Cox, helping Gavin Newsom because no one thinks Cox has any chance of beating Newsom.
How did Gavin Newsom support the Republican?
He ran some ads. I forget the exact tenor of the ads. He ran some ads that were basically designed to elevate Cox's prominence.
Wow.
I don't know if they're from him or from like
so he pulled it's almost like a Claire McCaskill type.
I don't think they were like Todd Akins is horrible conservative. Don't vote for him. I don't think it was quite like that, but I forget about. I haven't looked at those ads specifically to tell you exactly what the content was.
Damn it, Bill. You have
there are too many races.
I have certain expectations for you to do this podcast. So if I can't coast on doing no preparation and having you do all of it, then we're not going to be able to keep doing this.
No, so I think people on the left mostly like John Chang in the governor's race, but he never got off the ground. Some of them put their hopes on Kevin DeLeon, who was running against Dianne Feinstein, the incumbent Senate Democrat. And it looks like DeLeon did make top two, but with only 11% of the vote, and Feinstein's got 44%. So it is highly unlikely that DeLeon's going to get a flood of fundraising cash to be competitive against Feinstein when there's so many other things going on the Democrats care about. So that seemed to be a bust for the left in that race. However, San Francisco mayor, we talked about in the last show, This is a test of ranked choice voting. London Breed, African-American woman, briefly was mayor when Ed Lee died because she was president of the Board of Supervisors, but she's seen as close to the tech industry, and so a lot of the left-wing progressives don't like her. She's ousted as mayor in a vote at the Board of Supervisors in favor of a caretaker mayor. And one of the people who voted for her was Jane Kim, who's on the Board of Supervisors and running for mayor. This ranked choice voting bill, is this where I remember talking about this as a possible idea for Republicans to use in their presidential primaries? So, like, would this be where if, like, Tim Pawlenty was everybody's second choice, but, like, 30% of the people had Donald Trump as number 1, but 70% had him as number 10, like, Pawlenty would have actually won? Yes, that's right.
Even though he was nobody's first choice, he was everyone's everyone could tolerate him.
Well, the way it works in San Francisco is you get to vote for 3, and you rank them 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
And if you're in 10th place, because this is a nonpartisan primary, a nonpartisan race, everybody's on the ballot at the same time, you're in 10th place, you're in last place, you get taken off, and your second place votes get redistributed to that's person.
How it works.
Yeah. So in San Francisco, Jane Kim, who was running more on the left as board supervisor member, Mark Leno, former state senator, also running on the left, they joined forces and run ads saying, I'm Jane Kim, I'm voting for Mark Leno, Leno, I'm voting for Jane Kim, basically say, vote for us 1, 2, and screw London Breed. They don't say her name in it, but that's the clear implication. So in the balloting, you can see they do 9 rounds of it as people's names get peeled off. London Breed had the most first place votes in the first round. She remained in first place in the 8th round, but in the 9th round, Jane Kim, who was in 3rd place, her votes get taken off. About 2/3 to 3/4 of her votes go to Mark Leno. Leno is now in first place by 1,200 votes.
Right. And what this does is ultimately, right, it means that instead of like the most intensity winning, you get the candidate that the most people could tolerate.
Correct.
Right? That's the difference.
Because
so like Tim Pawlenty or Marco Rubio, someone like that would have probably been the Republican nominee instead of Trump if you were doing this kind of balloting.
I mean, that assumes that if you were a Ted Cruz voter, for example, you didn't have Trump as your second choice. And Leno and Kim made a strategy to tell their voters, you better not make London Breed your second choice if you want one of us. So it takes some forethought to try to engineer that outcome. But I just want to emphasize, there are outstanding mail ballots, so it's still possible their votes are going to come in and Breed could eke it out. But you can see how that strategy can work and make sure that the person with the most first place votes doesn't become mayor.
Do you know why San Francisco? Now, this is a tough question, but like, do you know why they went to this more elaborate style of selection?
It is a cause of the independent left who believe that their preferred candidates never get taken seriously because they get accused of attracting wasted votes.
I see.
It's a Ralph Nader, Jill Stein, and I don't want to say it's just those folks because I know people who didn't vote for them who are for ranked choice voting, but that is the drive. So to no more can you say you have a wasted vote, because you could always say, I'm going to make the more pragmatic choice my number 2. If my first place doesn't get in, I still get my vote counted.
You can go with your heart on number 1.
Exactly.
But then have like a safety valve. Like, but if that doesn't happen, that's okay because Mitt Romney's number 2. Right. You know.
And so when this first became practice in San Francisco, Ed Lee was the interim mayor. He also he was too close to the business community by someone on the left. He runs against 20 leftists, none of whom get any oxygen, and Lee wins without on the first round. So it's a reminder that the process itself is not some magic formula to get your candidate. Once you had some candidates to the left with some with pedigree, with some organization, and a strategy to coordinate their voting, then the process actually worked in their favor.
Well, it makes sense if your theory is that a primary is about picking a candidate that the broadest base of people on your team are okay with, right? This is going to be our standard bearer. And if a third of our supporters love this person, but the rest of the people are blah, that's not what we want. We want a consensus candidate that everyone can live with to be our standard bearer. Like, this would make more sense, right?
I think it can work that way, but I'm not sure, and I'm not in San Francisco, so I don't want to presume. I don't know if everyone's going to be like, oh, Mark Leno's my consensus candidate. Which is why I pick up on Twitter. I think there's some London Breed fans who are really pissed off right now. She was in first place. Why isn't she mayor?
Yeah.
So it's not like everyone's going to be kumbaya when this is all over. I mean, I think just as a matter of plain fact, Leno was the person, assuming he ekes it out, who had the broadest level of support, even if it wasn't the deepest. And that form of voting is designed to give a candidate like that a shot at winning. And if Breed also, Breed didn't have majority support, so you can't say she automatically deserves it, but the candidate with the deepest level of support was London Breed. It just depends on what your philosophy of election should be. Are you a first past the post person, or are you majority plus one person? I mean, this is just taking what you would call a runoff and consolidating it into a single days of voting. So The argument for Leno is, look, if this was a runoff situation when Breed versus Leno, and Leno would have won it, so would have taken 2 more months and spent more money. So why not cut to the chase? But if you're a Breed fan, you're probably not going to look at it that way.
Very interesting. Well, this is why people tune into the DMZ religiously.
Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap things up today?
I think we're good, man.
All right. So till next week, what do you got to plug?
Well, check out my podcast with David Axelrod on Matt Lewis and the News on iTunes. Rate and review the podcast, and why not rate and review this one too? The DMZ show.
What a brilliant idea!
You can find it on iTunes, or maybe you're watching us, you might be listening to us. Just take a minute, rate us, review us.
I produced a lot of content this week. I have I have another Politico article on why Democrats should be optimistic about Trump and North Korea, and they should be prepared to defend what Trump does in North Korea. I have a piece in Real Clear Politics about Schumer's attempt to blame Trump for high gas prices, which I think is idiocy. And my latest New Books in Politics podcast with David Nywert, author of Alt America, longtime chronicler of far-right militant extremism, giving you the history of how we got to the alt-right going back past several decades. That was a good conversation.
Indeed, I'm a fan of your podcast.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Check that out. Also, rate and review it.
What a good idea.
Why not? Everybody, follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show, and we'll see you back here next week in the DMZ.
All right. Take care.
See you, Bill.